"Dad, if Mr. Ethan leaves this school, then I'm leaving too." The words rang across the front courtyard of Brookstone Elementary with a clarity that silenced every conversation, every hurried footstep, every engine idling along the pickup lane. Parents froze beside polished SUVs. Teachers lowered their clipboards. Even the morning breeze seemed to hesitate as a little blonde girl wrapped both arms around the school's quiet janitor and refused to let go. Ethan Brooks stood perfectly still, one weathered hand resting gently on the wooden broom he had been using moments earlier. His faded navy maintenance shirt carried the scent of fresh floor wax and autumn leaves, and a few gray strands of hair caught the golden September sunlight. He didn't tighten his embrace. He didn't pull away. He simply smiled with the quiet patience of a man who had spent years learning that kindness rarely needed loud words. Parked only a few yards away, a gleaming black limousine reflected the crimson maple trees lining the campus entrance. Its rear door swung open, and Victor Harrington stepped onto the sidewalk. At 55, the billionaire founder of Harrington Global carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to making decisions that moved markets before breakfast. His tailored charcoal suit looked untouched by the cool morning air, and the polished leather of his shoes barely made a sound against the concrete as he approached. His eyes settled first on his daughter, Lily. Then they shifted toward the janitor holding a worn broom beside an aging cleaning cart. His expression hardened instantly. "Lily," he called, his voice calm but unmistakably firm. "Come here. We're leaving." The little girl never even looked back. She buried her face against Ethan's side and shook her head. "No." A murmur spread through the gathered parents. Victor frowned, clearly believing this would end with a simple command. "Lily," he repeated, a little louder this time. "That's enough." She looked up at him, tears shining in her blue eyes. Yet there was something stronger than sadness behind them. It was certainty. "No, Dad," she whispered. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." The sentence landed with unexpected weight. Teachers exchanged uncertain glances. A crossing guard lowered the stop sign in her hand without realizing it. Somewhere across the playground, a flag rope clicked softly against its metal pole, the only sound brave enough to interrupt the silence. Ethan finally spoke, his voice gentle enough to calm frightened children and weary hearts alike. "It's all right, Lily. Your father came to take you home." She tightened her grip. "Home isn't where people care about your last name," she answered quietly. "Home is where people make you feel safe." Victor's jaw stiffened. He had negotiated billion-dollar mergers, faced hostile investors, and survived economic crises that filled newspaper headlines for weeks. Yet nothing had prepared him for hearing his 10-year-old daughter choose a school janitor over him in front of an entire campus. He took another step forward, his face composed, but the color slowly drained from it as Lily added 6 words that no one standing there would ever forget. "He saved me long before you did." The words lingered in the morning air long after no one could find an answer for them. But before anyone understood why Lily had spoken with such conviction, the truth had begun months earlier in ways so ordinary that almost everyone overlooked them. Ethan Brooks arrived every weekday at 5:30 in the morning, nearly 2 hours before the first school bus rolled through the neighborhood. The parking lot was still wrapped in darkness, the only sounds coming from distant songbirds and the soft hum of fluorescent lights flickering awake inside the hallways. He unlocked the maintenance room, poured fresh coffee into an old stainless steel mug, and quietly began another day that looked exactly like the one before it. He repaired loose desk legs before children noticed them. He tightened playground bolts before anyone could trip. He swept away broken branches after every storm and shoveled snow from every sidewalk before the first teacher unlocked a classroom door. Most people passed him without more than a polite nod. Some never learned his name at all. To many parents, he was simply the janitor. Invisible. Replaceable. Yet every child in Brookstone Elementary somehow knew that if a backpack zipper broke, if a science project collapsed, or if a frightened first grader needed help finding the right classroom, Mr. Ethan would somehow appear with a calm smile and a simple solution. He never rushed anyone. He never complained. He always knelt so he could speak to children at eye level because, as he quietly believed, respect was measured by how low you were willing to bend for someone who needed comfort. His own life had become wonderfully simple after years of disappointment. The small white farmhouse he rented sat less than 3 miles from the school beside an aging maple tree whose leaves painted the yard gold every October. Every evening he returned home to his 12-year-old daughter, Emma, whose laughter filled the little kitchen while they cooked inexpensive dinners together. They did not have much, but they had traditions. Friday pancakes became Saturday breakfast because syrup was cheaper on weekends. Movie nights happened with blankets instead of theater tickets. Every birthday cake was homemade, even if the frosting leaned a little crooked. Ethan often reminded Emma that happiness did not always arrive wrapped in expensive paper. Sometimes it wore work boots and carried a lunch bucket instead. Emma believed every word because she had never seen her father speak differently to a billionaire than he did to a lonely child sitting by herself during recess. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, several months before the unforgettable morning outside the school entrance, Ethan noticed a little girl sitting alone beneath the covered walkway after dismissal. Every other child had already gone home. She hugged her backpack tightly while staring at puddles collecting beside the curb. Ethan approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "Everything all right, Miss Lily?" he asked. She looked up with a tired smile far older than her 10 years. "Dad forgot there was an early dismissal," she answered softly. Ethan nodded without a trace of judgment. That happens sometimes. Instead of filling the silence with unnecessary conversation, he disappeared into the faculty lounge and returned carrying a small paper cup of warm hot chocolate left over from a teacher's appreciation event. "It is not fancy," he said with a gentle grin, "but it tastes better while waiting." Lily accepted it with both hands as though he had handed her something priceless. From that afternoon forward, she never walked past Ethan without stopping to say good morning. She learned the names of the flowers he planted beside the entrance each spring. She asked about Emma. She laughed at his terrible jokes about squeaky classroom doors. And somewhere between countless ordinary mornings and quiet conversations, she discovered something many adults never noticed at all. The kindest person in the building was the one almost nobody stopped to see. Victor Harrington had built an empire by trusting numbers, contracts, and instincts that rarely failed him. But standing in the school courtyard that morning, none of them explained why his daughter clung to a maintenance worker as though she had found the safest place in the world. The silence finally broke when Principal Margaret Collins stepped forward, smoothing the sleeve of her navy blazer before offering a careful smile. "Mr. Harrington," she said gently, "perhaps we should continue this conversation inside my office." Victor gave a single nod. "Lily," he said, keeping his voice controlled, "come with me." She looked up at Ethan instead. "Should I go?" Ethan smiled with the same calm warmth she had come to trust over countless mornings. "Yes, your father deserves to hear what you have to say." Lily slowly loosened her grip and followed her father toward the administration building, glancing back twice before disappearing through the glass doors. Ethan quietly returned his broom to the cleaning cart and resumed sweeping scattered maple leaves from the front sidewalk as though nothing extraordinary had happened. That simple act unsettled Victor even more than the confrontation itself. Most people would have defended themselves. Others would have tried to impress him or explain their innocence. Ethan did neither. Inside the principal's office, sunlight spilled across shelves lined with student artwork and reading awards. The room smelled faintly of fresh coffee and sharpened pencils. Victor remained standing while Lily sat quietly in the chair beside the window. Principal Collins folded her hands across the desk. "How can I help?" Victor answered without hesitation. "I want to know exactly why my daughter has become emotionally attached to an employee whose job is cleaning hallways." Lily frowned immediately. "He is not just a janitor." Victor looked toward her. "Lily, he remembers every kid's birthday," she replied. "He fixes things nobody else notices. He makes people feel like they matter." Victor exhaled slowly. "Sweetheart, people can appear kind for many reasons." Lily shook her head. "Not for months. Not every single day." The billionaire turned back toward the principal. "With respect, this relationship has crossed a professional boundary." Principal Collins remained remarkably composed. "Mr. Harrington, Ethan Brooks has worked here for 7 years. We have never received a single complaint about him. In fact, he is one of the most trusted employees on campus." Victor crossed his arms. "Trusted by whom?" Before the principal could answer, a soft knock interrupted the conversation. Mrs. Evelyn Parker, a veteran 4th grade teacher with silver hair and reading glasses hanging from a blue cord, stepped into the office holding a folder. "I am sorry," she said. "You asked for attendance reports." She noticed Victor and smiled politely before setting the folder down. "Mr. Harrington, if this is about Ethan, I hope you do not mind an old teacher sharing something." Victor gestured politely. "Go ahead." Mrs. Parker smiled at Lily before continuing. "Last winter, one of my students came to school wearing shoes with holes in the soles. Nobody knew except Ethan. 2 days later, a brand new pair appeared anonymously in the nurse's office. Ethan never admitted buying them. Another knock followed almost immediately. School counselor Daniel Ruiz entered carrying student wellness forms. Hearing the conversation, he quietly added, "He also volunteers every Thursday afternoon reading with children who struggle with confidence." He asked that we never announce it because he said the children deserve privacy, not publicity. Victor listened without interrupting, yet his expression remained cautious. Successful people often heard flattering stories. They rarely accepted them without proof. Lily watched her father carefully. She recognized the same guarded look he wore during business interviews shown on television. She also knew something he did not. Kindness leaves evidence everywhere, even when the person showing it never asks anyone to notice. Victor Harrington did not argue with the teachers. He simply listened, his expression unreadable as more names and quiet stories continued to fill the small office. Principal Collins reached for a thin binder resting on the corner of her desk. "We keep letters from parents and students," she explained softly. "Most are thank you notes. Ethan never asked to see any of them." She opened the binder to a page decorated with uneven crayon hearts. "Dear Mr. Ethan, thank you for fixing my wheelchair when everybody else said I had to wait until Monday. Because of you, I got to play at recess. Love, Noah." Victor remained silent. Another page followed. "Thank you for finding my grandmother's wedding ring after everyone thought it was lost forever." Then another. "Thank you for staying after school until my mother arrived because I was scared to wait alone." The pages continued one after another, not celebrating great achievements, but countless small acts of kindness that had quietly changed ordinary days. Lily smiled through damp eyes. "I told you," she whispered. Victor looked toward the window where children laughed across the playground, completely unaware that a simple conversation inside the office was beginning to reshape the way one powerful man viewed the world. "Words are meaningful," Victor finally said, "but I built my career verifying facts." Principal Collins nodded with understanding. "Then perhaps facts are exactly what you should see." She picked up the telephone and spoke briefly with the technology coordinator. A few minutes later, they walked together into the school's security office, a modest room lined with monitors displaying hallways, entrances, classrooms, and playgrounds. The hum of computer equipment blended with the quiet clicking of keyboards while rain clouds slowly drifted across the afternoon sky outside. "Our cameras overwrite every 30 days, the coordinator explained. Fortunately, several clips were archived because they involved maintenance requests. He opened the first recording. Ethan appeared before sunrise repairing a loose section of sidewalk railing. No one else was present. Another clip showed him carefully placing bright orange cones around a patch of ice before students arrived. Another revealed him kneeling beside a frightened kindergarten student whose backpack strap had snapped. Instead of calling someone else, Ethan calmly repaired it with tools from his maintenance cart, smiled, and watched the little boy skip happily toward class. Victor folded his arms tighter, but said nothing. The coordinator selected another recording from early spring. Heavy rain had poured throughout the afternoon dismissal. Parents rushed beneath umbrellas while children hurried toward waiting vehicles. Lily stepped onto the wet sidewalk, carrying too many books at once. A gust of wind flipped several papers into the parking lot. Before she even reacted, Ethan quietly walked into the rain, gathered every page one by one, dried them with clean paper towels from the custodial closet, and returned them without expecting a thank you. Lily looked down. "I never knew the cameras saw that." "He never mentioned it either," Principal Collins replied. Another recording appeared. A second grader sat alone during lunch with tears in her eyes after dropping her tray. Ethan entered carrying a mop. Instead of simply cleaning the floor, he sat beside the child for several minutes until she smiled again. The cafeteria workers later brought her another meal, but only after Ethan gently reminded them that embarrassment can feel much heavier than hunger. The room grew quieter with every clip. No applause. No dramatic music. Just ordinary moments stitched together by extraordinary character. Victor slowly lowered his arms. How many of these recordings are there? He asked. The coordinator looked at the growing archive on the screen before answering with quiet honesty. Enough that after a while you stop looking for what Ethan fixed and start noticing how many people he quietly held together without anyone realizing it. Victor Harrington left the security office carrying far more questions than answers. The recordings had challenged his assumptions, but years of leading one of the country's largest corporations had taught him never to build conclusions from emotion alone. Facts mattered. Patterns mattered. Character revealed itself over time. As the afternoon sun settled behind drifting clouds, he walked slowly through the school corridors instead of heading back to his waiting limousine. The hallway floors gleamed beneath the ceiling lights, each classroom decorated with colorful artwork and handwritten goals for the new semester. Somewhere nearby, a choir rehearsal drifted through an open music room, filling the building with soft voices that made the campus feel less like an institution and more like a home. Victor noticed something unexpected. Nearly every student who passed Ethan greeted him by name. Good afternoon, Mr. Ethan. Thanks for fixing the basketball hoop. See you tomorrow. Ethan answered every greeting with the same warm smile, never lingering long enough to become the center of attention because another task always seemed to be waiting. He straightened a crooked welcome sign, replaced a burned-out light bulb outside the library, and quietly carried a stack of forgotten lunchboxes toward the front office. Nothing he did appeared remarkable until Victor realized how many small burdens disappeared before anyone else noticed them. As he continued walking, Lily gently tugged on her father's sleeve. Can I show you something? Victor nodded. She led him toward a quiet reading corner beside the elementary library, where a large oak tree spread its branches just outside the windows. On one wall hung dozens of colorful paper leaves. Every leaf carried the name of a student and one sentence describing an act of kindness they had witnessed during the year. Lily pointed toward one written in careful blue marker. Read that one. Victor stepped closer. It simply said, Mr. Ethan told me that making mistakes means I am still learning. I stopped being afraid to raise my hand in class. Another leaf read, he fixed my science project after school so I could still enter the fair. Another said, he remembered my dog's name even after she passed away. Victor slowly scanned the entire display. None of the leaves praised wealth, trophies, or popularity. They celebrated moments of compassion so small that no newspaper would ever print them. Who started this? He asked quietly. Principal Collins, who had joined them, smiled. Actually, the students did. We only gave them paper. They chose the names. Before Victor could respond, Emma Brooks entered the library carrying a canvas tote bag filled with donated children's books. She looked almost exactly like her father, with kind blue eyes and a gentle smile that seemed permanently at ease. Hi, Dad, she called cheerfully. Ethan looked up from repairing a loose shelf hinge. Finished already? Yes, Emma answered. Mrs. Parker said the first graders loved story hour. Victor watched the brief exchange. There was no performance, no attempt to impress anyone. Just a father proud of the young woman his daughter was becoming. Emma noticed Lily and waved. Want to help me organize the new books? Lily immediately smiled. Sure. The two girls disappeared between the library shelves chatting about their favorite stories, while Ethan quietly returned to tightening the final screw on the bookshelf. Victor studied the simple toolbox resting beside him. Its handle was worn smooth from years of use, and tucked beneath the lid was a faded family photograph of Ethan and Emma smiling on what appeared to be a hiking trail years earlier. No luxury vacations. No expensive possessions. Just two people who genuinely looked grateful to have each other. For reasons he could not yet explain, Victor felt an unfamiliar weight settle across his heart. He had spent decades building companies that employed thousands of people, yet standing inside that little library, he began to wonder whether true success might sometimes be measured by something far quieter than the size of an empire. The school day was winding toward its peaceful end when the weather changed without warning. Dark clouds rolled across the September sky, and a steady rain began tapping against the classroom windows, turning the playground into a mirror of shimmering puddles. Teachers calmly adjusted dismissal procedures while office staff reminded parents through the school messaging system to expect slight delays. Inside the building, there was no panic, only the familiar rhythm of adults working together to keep children safe and comfortable. Ethan Brooks moved through the hallways with his usual quiet purpose, placing bright yellow caution signs near the entrances where wet shoes might leave slippery floors. He checked every exit door, wiped away tracked-in rainwater, and smiled at each passing student as though nothing unusual had happened. Victor Harrington remained in the front office longer than he had planned, finishing a business call while waiting for the weather to improve. Through the large glass entrance, he watched buses arrive one after another, their flashing lights reflecting across the rain-soaked pavement. Lily sat nearby reading one of the library books Emma had helped her choose, occasionally glancing toward Ethan as he continued making sure every child left the building safely. Suddenly the lights flickered once. Then again, a deep rumble of thunder echoed somewhere in the distance, and the entire school briefly lost power. The emergency lights immediately illuminated the hallways with a soft amber glow exactly as they had been designed to do. A few younger students looked around nervously, uncertain about the unexpected darkness. Before fear had time to spread, Ethan's calm voice carried through the corridor. "Everything is all right, everyone. Please stay with your teachers. The backup system is working exactly as it should." His confidence settled the room almost instantly. Children who had begun whispering returned to quiet conversations, reassured more by his steady tone than by the emergency lights themselves. Ethan walked quickly but never rushed, checking each classroom to ensure every teacher had what they needed. In the kindergarten wing, he noticed a little boy beginning to cry because he could not find his favorite stuffed dinosaur in the confusion. Ethan knelt beside him with an encouraging smile. "Your dinosaur would never leave without saying goodbye," he said gently. "Let us go find your brave little friend together." Less than a minute later, he spotted the toy beneath a reading bench, dusted it off, and placed it back into the grateful child's hands. The tears disappeared as quickly as they had arrived. Meanwhile, Principal Collins coordinated dismissal with remarkable composure, directing families through covered entrances while staff members assisted wherever they could. Victor quietly observed something he had never truly appreciated before. Leadership was not always the loudest voice giving orders. Sometimes it was the calmest person helping others believe there was nothing to fear. As maintenance staff confirmed that the temporary outage had already been resolved, the building lights slowly returned, filling the hallways with warm brightness once again. A wave of cheerful applause rose from several classrooms, and laughter quickly replaced uncertainty. Teachers smiled at one another, grateful that what could have become a stressful afternoon had instead become little more than an unexpected interruption. Ethan simply picked up the caution signs one by one and continued drying the remaining patches of rainwater near the entrance. He accepted no praise because, in his mind, he had only done the work the day required. Victor walked toward him, studying the quiet man with growing respect. Before he could speak, a district facilities supervisor entered through the front doors carrying a clipboard. Looking directly at Ethan, he smiled and said, "I reviewed the emergency response report from today. Once again, your preparation made everything run exactly the way it was supposed to. I wish every school had someone who cared this much." Ethan gave a modest nod. "The children deserve to feel safe," he answered simply. Victor heard those words, and for the first time in many years, he realized he was standing beside a man who measured success not by the size of his accomplishments, but by the number of worries he quietly prevented before anyone else ever noticed. They existed. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the school grounds washed clean beneath a pale afternoon sky that glowed with the soft light only autumn could create. Parents gradually drove away, buses disappeared one by one, and the cheerful noise of dismissal slowly faded into peaceful silence. Ethan Brooks wheeled his maintenance cart toward the rear storage building, pausing every few steps to straighten recycling bins and collect forgotten jackets left behind in the rush home. It was the same quiet routine he had followed for years, never expecting anyone to notice. Behind him, Victor Harrington remained standing beneath the covered entrance, unable to shake the feeling that something about Ethan seemed strangely familiar. It was not his face. It was not his voice. It was the calm confidence with which he carried himself, the kind that could not be learned from books or business schools. As Ethan reached into his toolbox to return a screwdriver, the sleeve of his work shirt slipped back just enough to reveal a weathered silver bracelet around his wrist. Hanging from it was a small bronze compass charm, its surface scratched by years of use. Victor's eyes narrowed. He had seen that compass before. Not once. Not twice. Exactly 20 years earlier. The memory surfaced so suddenly that the sounds of the school seemed to disappear. He was no longer standing outside Brookstone Elementary. He was a young entrepreneur driving alone through the mountains of western Colorado after a late investor meeting. Heavy snow had covered the narrow highway, and visibility had fallen to almost nothing. His luxury sedan had slid off the shoulder and become trapped in a deep snowbank. The engine had stalled. His cell phone had lost service. Temperatures continued dropping with every passing minute. He remembered sitting behind the steering wheel wondering whether anyone would even know where to search. Then headlights appeared through the storm. An old pickup truck stopped several yards away. A man wearing a thick work jacket stepped into the blowing snow carrying a tow strap and a flashlight. He never asked who Victor was. He never asked what the expensive car was worth. He simply smiled and said, "Looks like you could use another pair of hands." Together, they worked patiently until the sedan rolled free. Victor had reached for his wallet, determined to reward the stranger generously, but the man politely stepped back. "Keep it," he had said. "Maybe one day you will help someone else." Before driving away, Victor noticed only one detail that remained unforgettable. The man adjusted a silver bracelet with a small bronze compass hanging from it before climbing back into his pickup and disappearing into the snowfall. The memory vanished as quickly as it had arrived, leaving Victor staring at Ethan across the quiet school courtyard. His heartbeat quickened. It could not be a coincidence. Slowly he walked toward the maintenance shed. Ethan looked up with his usual friendly smile. "Can I help you, Mr. Harrington?" Victor did not answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the compass charm resting against Ethan's wrist. "That bracelet," he finally said, almost whispering. Ethan glanced down before smiling faintly. "My late wife gave it to me years ago. She always said a compass reminds us that the right direction is more important than the fastest one." Victor felt the color drain from his face. Every word matched the memory he had carried for 2 decades. "Have you ever driven through the Colorado mountains during a blizzard?" he asked carefully. Ethan paused for the first time all day. A thoughtful expression crossed his face. "Many years ago," he answered. "I helped a man whose car got stuck in the snow. I hope he made it home safely." Victor could barely breathe. Ethan had forgotten the man completely. But Victor suddenly realized he had spent 20 years searching for success, while never finding the stranger whose quiet kindness had given him the chance to continue the journey that built his entire future. For several long seconds, neither man spoke. The quiet between them carried more weight than any speech either of them could have prepared. Ethan searched Victor's face with polite curiosity, unaware that a single forgotten memory had just reshaped everything the billionaire believed about the man standing before him. Victor slowly removed his glasses and drew a careful breath. "It was me," he said at last. "I was the driver you helped that night." Ethan blinked once, then smiled gently, though there was no sign of triumph in his expression. "I am glad you made it home safely." That simple reply struck Victor harder than any boardroom negotiation ever had. "You do not remember my name?" he asked. Ethan shook his head. "No, sir. I never asked for it." "You never tried to find me?" Another small shake of the head. "You needed help." That was enough. Victor lowered his eyes. For 20 years, he had believed every meaningful relationship began with an introduction, a contract, or a business opportunity. Yet the man who had quietly changed the course of his life had expected absolutely nothing in return. The realization settled over him like the calm that follows a passing storm. Principal Margaret Collins stepped outside after locking the front office and paused when she noticed the 2 men standing together in unusual silence. Lily and Emma soon followed, talking happily about the library books they planned to exchange the following week. Lily looked from her father to Ethan and sensed immediately that something had changed. Victor turned toward his daughter, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Lily," he said, "you were right." She tilted her head. "About what?" He looked at Ethan before answering. "I was looking at his job instead of his character." Lily smiled, not because she had won an argument, but because she recognized something far more valuable. Her father was listening with his heart instead of his assumptions. Victor then took several slow steps until he stood directly in front of Ethan. Teachers leaving for the evening paused near their cars. Parents collecting forgotten backpacks stopped walking. The courtyard gradually became still once again, though no one seemed to know why. Victor extended his hand, but before Ethan could reach for it, the billionaire quietly lowered it and bowed his head instead. It was not dramatic. It was not performed for attention. It was simply the sincere gesture of a man choosing humility over pride. "Mr. Brooks," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it, "I owe you two apologies. The first is for judging you before knowing you. The second is for taking 20 years to say thank you." Ethan looked genuinely uncomfortable with the attention. He gently touched Victor's shoulder and encouraged him to straighten up. "There is nothing to repay," he answered. "Kindness is not a loan." Several teachers quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Even Principal Collins found herself smiling through unexpected emotion. Emma looked at her father with unmistakable pride, while Lily slipped her small hand into Victor's. "See," she whispered. "I told you he was different." Victor nodded slowly. "No," he replied. "He reminds us what we are supposed to become." The evening sun broke through the last gray clouds, casting warm golden light across the entrance of Brookstone Elementary. The polished windows reflected children, teachers, parents, and a humble maintenance worker standing together without titles separating them. For the first time in many years, Victor Harrington understood that the strongest people were rarely the ones who demanded respect. More often, they were the ones whose quiet dignity inspired it without ever asking. 1 week later, the auditorium at Brookstone Elementary, filled with the familiar sounds of families finding their seats, children whispering excitedly, and teachers making final preparations for the school's annual Community Appreciation Assembly. Colorful student artwork lined the walls, the stage curtains glowed beneath warm lights, and the scent of fresh popcorn from the parent volunteer table drifted through the room. Ethan Brooks stood quietly near the side entrance wearing the same neatly pressed maintenance uniform he wore every day. He believed he was there only to make sure everything ran smoothly. He checked the microphones one last time, straightened a loose stage curtain, and prepared to slip quietly back into the hallway before the ceremony began. Instead, Principal Margaret Collins stepped onto the stage with an unexpected smile. "Before we recognize our student achievements," she said, "there is someone whose work has shaped this school in ways that cannot be measured by grades or trophies." Ethan looked around, assuming another staff member was about to be honored. Then Principal Collins spoke his name. The audience immediately erupted into warm applause. Ethan hesitated, almost looking behind himself to see whether someone else shared his name. Emma smiled proudly from the second row, while Lily waved both hands enthusiastically. "Come on, Mr. Ethan," she called. "They are talking about you." The applause continued until Ethan slowly walked toward the stage, clearly more comfortable holding a broom than standing beneath bright lights. Once he reached the microphone, Principal Collins welcomed Victor Harrington to join her. The billionaire stepped forward carrying a simple wooden plaque rather than an expensive crystal award. "I have spent my life investing in buildings, companies, and technology," Victor began. "But recently my daughter reminded me that the greatest investments are the ones made quietly in people, one act of kindness at a time." The auditorium became perfectly still. Victor turned toward Ethan with genuine respect. "Mr. Brooks, your compassion has strengthened this school far beyond anything money alone could accomplish. In honor of your example, the Harrington Foundation will fully fund a new student resource library, expanded reading programs, and emergency assistance for families facing difficult times." A wave of grateful applause filled the room, but Victor gently raised his hand for one final announcement. "The library will be named the Ethan Brooks Center for Kindness and Learning, because every child deserves to remember that character is the strongest foundation any future can stand upon." Ethan's eyes filled with quiet emotion. He stepped toward the microphone and waited for the applause to fade. "Thank you," he said softly. "But if I may ask one favor, please let the children believe this place belongs to them, not to me. If my name reminds them to help one another, then I will be honored. If not, I would rather they simply remember that every person they meet is carrying a story they cannot see." His words settled gently over the audience. Emma brushed away a tear while Lily walked onto the stage without hesitation and wrapped her arms around Ethan once again. This time Victor smiled instead of pulling her away. In fact, he placed one hand gently on Ethan's shoulder and the other on Lily's back, forming a quiet picture of trust that no photographer could have staged more perfectly. As families slowly stood to leave, many paused not to admire the new donation or congratulate the billionaire, but to shake the hand of the humble school janitor whose greatest accomplishment had never been repairing floors or fixing broken desks. It had been repairing hope wherever he found it. Outside, golden leaves drifted across the sidewalk as the evening sun settled behind the maple trees. Ethan picked up his familiar broom and smiled as though nothing important had changed. In many ways, nothing had. He was still the same quiet father who believed dignity did not need applause. Kindness did not require recognition, and the strongest hearts were often hidden beneath the simplest uniforms. Yet everyone who walked past him that evening saw him differently, because they had finally learned a truth that children like Lily had understood all along. The richest life is never measured by what a person owns, but by how many lives become brighter simply because they chose to care.